we first have to know that parenting is not intuitive, it's a learned skill. And so, in order to make changes, we have to actually do something different. We can't keep doing the same thing, hoping for different results.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today, we're excited to have Tia Slightham with us, a parenting coach who's going to help us understand how we can create positive solutions to your parenting struggles and help you reconnect with your child. We're really excited for this episode. There's a ton of knowledge. Let's go. Welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we're super excited. We have Tia Slightham with us. Tia is a parenting coach, teacher, business owner, best-selling author, and most importantly, out of all of that, she's a mom. She's the founder of Tia Slightham Parenting Solutions and the Parenting with Purpose method, where she works with parents to teach them positive ways to discover the daily struggles we all encounter as parents. She has a master's degree in early childhood and is certified in positive discipline and has worked with kids and families over 17 years. Tia, thanks for coming on with us. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So much to talk about.
Oh yeah, this is a topic that's just never ending, I think.
Exactly. But once you have it all, I'm going to tell you it's going to be so much easier. So I'm glad we're getting into it today.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited. I know Dr. Riley is excited. Dr. Riley, my co-host here. I'm Kyle Craig. So let's get right into it. My first question for you, Tia, is what is one of the most common things? Because you work with parents who are, coming to you, I'm assuming stressed out, kind of strung out. What's the most common thing that you're hearing from parents today?
Yeah, I think the most common phrase and complaint that parents come to me with is that everything I try, nothing works. And I end up yelling and my kids don't listen. And then I hate myself for yelling. I feel exhausted and overwhelmed, and I just don't know how to make it different. And so this feeling of feeling overwhelmed leads them to, mental strain and stress and physical, fatigue. And it's just this all-encompassing cloud that really stems from a lack of knowing how to parent in an effective way.
I was just telling Dr. Riley before we came on here today. I was like, man, my two boys, like they just got me. Some mornings they get me so riled up. Like you try so hard to be that nice dad or something like that, or you try so hard to make that approach, but kids have a way of just really testing you and pushing your buttons, right? And so, and I think that's something that I hear a lot too with parents who are coming to me even and saying like, man, I'm just so stressed out. I don't know what to do with my kids anymore. What do you think is what's one of the first things parents can do to just calm themselves down in that moment where they're starting to get, so riled up?
Yeah, we often get really riled up because we're reacting to our child's behavior. And so once we start reacting to the behavior, the outside world is already controlling you. So in theory, you've kind of already lost that battle. And so what we want to do is we want to work on learning to respond to our child's behavior. And in order to do that, we have to understand why the behaviors are happening. So when our kids are pushing our buttons and our limits and taking us to the edge of the cliff, which it feels like they can do, they're actually doing their job. So it's their job they have two predetermined jobs. So it's their job to please you, but it's also their job to push boundaries until boundaries are found. And so if we look at the morning routines and what's happening and they're pushing our limits, chances are we're not super 3 C's. That's what I call concrete, clear, and consistent. If we're super 3 C's on our boundaries, our kids know how to please us. They know what our expectations are. And then with that allows them to stop pushing and us to finally feel some relief. And so the root cause of that is really understanding why the behaviors are happening instead of surface problem solving. Most of the time as parents, we see the morning routine going haywire. We see the bedtime not working. We see them not brushing their teeth. And we're like, holy shit, we need to get them to brush their teeth. We need to get them to go to bed. We need to get them to get dressed. And we're focusing on that moment. And we're saying, how can I get them to do that? Which leads us typically to force them to do it or bribe them or negotiate or give them if you don't do this, then I'm going to take away this scenario. Really what we're doing is we're putting a BandAid on the issues that we're seeing because those are just the symptoms. And we're trying to symptom problem solve instead of root problem solve, which a lot of us do with our health challenges as well. And getting to the root is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so right. And it's a good analogy with people's health too, right? Is when people just try to do it, even like a fad diet or something like that. It's very similar to what you're saying, Tia, where you're just trying to put a band-aid over it, and that doesn't fix the solution. That's why when we work with our clients as well, we're always like, get to the why, right? And so what is typically the why? I don't know if that's a fair question to ask, but
Yeah.
when you're working with parents and you're uncovering that why, what's typically coming up? What's driving parents to get so frustrated, or to be so short with their kids, or to go towards that band-aid approach?
Yeah. So we first have to know that parenting is not intuitive. It's a learned skill. And so in order to make changes, we have to actually do something different. We can't keep doing the same thing, hoping for different results. And so we have to say to ourselves, okay, what I'm currently doing is not working. Most likely those tactics come from either the way we were raised, whether that was positive or negative, things we maybe don't want to be repeating, but we don't know how to change that, things we've read in books or listened to on podcasts, or maybe we've taken many courses or even hired coaches. But we're trying to like piece all of this together with our intuition, and that's going to keep parents stuck. And so we have to know that it's not your fault for not knowing how to get your kids to go to bed easily. It's not your fault that you're battling with your kids, because you're not supposed to know how to do it. But we do need to take time to learn the skills. And so I'll often even go through kind of like a core secret 6 that I'll say to parents, like, let's just do this, check these off, and let's say to ourselves, can I do these things or can I not do these things? And if we're having trouble in multiple areas within the secret 6, we are at a stage where we don't know the why behind behavior. And so by uncovering these secret 6, we're actually uncovering the whys. So should I go through the secret 6 and you guys can even just mentally check where you guys are at?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. So first of all, we talked about it a little bit already. Our kids' 2 predetermined jobs. Do we feel like our whole day, morning to night, has super concrete, clear, and consistent boundaries? That means you don't give in. You don't sometimes say 2 more minutes and then you say, okay, fine, 4 more minutes. They don't tantrum and cry and then you give them the cookie because you just want the noise to stop. They don't get in and out of bed 10 times and you keep taking them back in and tucking them in, or giving them a blanket or giving them their water. So think about your boundaries. And if they're not concrete, clear, and consistent, there's one of our whys where we need to focus. Okay. And if you guys want to interject to me anytime, please do, because otherwise I could talk for days. And then the other area where we want to start looking is our kids' basic needs. So are we really confidently checking the box of basic needs every single day? Meaning our kids are super well rested. So they go to bed easily, they fall asleep independently, they sleep through the night, and they wake up on their own. So often parents are waking their kids in the morning for school or for daycare. We're dragging them out of bed. And I'm telling you, that's a really strong red flag that your child's not getting enough sleep. If you cannot check the basic needs box, your kids are going to act out. We cannot have high expectations. We cannot reason with them. So within that basic needs box, we have the sleep, the nutrition, and the security. So overtired, over hungry kids, it's a total write-off. So focusing on that. So if you need to work on sleep solutions, then you want to ask yourself, do I need to work on sleep solutions? If the answer is yes, we need to focus there. And then transitions. Our kids struggle with transitions a lot, going from playing to coming to the bath, or trying to get out of the house to go to school. And a lot of times we don't have the skills to manage those transitions. So we fall back into the bribery, the rewards, that if you're not ready in 5 minutes, I'm going to leave you, which we all know you're not leaving your kids at home, but we all tend to kind of give that excuse. And so we really want to ask ourselves, are we checking the basic needs box? If not, there's another area in our secret 6 we really need to focus. Any questions about those few that we've talked about so far?
Dr. Riley?
No, I see a lot of bribery happening, especially amongst the age range that you tend to work with, which is up to age 12. Is that correct? Tends to be?
I would say my average is 12, although I have families in my program right now up to 16.
Okay.
So really, any parent of any child of any age needs these foundations, but I do tend to have a majority of parents ages 1 to 12.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I see that a lot, like the bribery and then the threats. And, eventually I see that the threats working if the parent seems to like get mad enough almost as they're threatening, and then the kid finally backs off. But yeah, it doesn't seem, from outside looking in, it doesn't seem like it's healthy or that effective. And so maybe as you're going through this, you'll get into it a little bit more, but I'm really interested in that concept of effective consequences that I've seen labeled throughout your work. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because most of the time that's what parents do. We set our boundaries and our kids are going to follow them. So if our boundary is that we negotiate and that I should come back and push, or mom or dad are going to give me an opportunity to get something if I don't do it right away, because then they're going to bribe me, then that's the boundary we set. Other times we give reminders, we ask nicely, then we get a little frustrated. And then when we finally yell and go crazy, our kids are like, oh, that's where I listen. I listen when they get mad, because that's the boundary we've set. So what we come to learn is that every single thing that our child's doing is actually a direct reflection of our parenting. And it's not to make anybody feel bad. It's not to point fingers at anybody, but it is there to show you that, hey, I can actually learn the skills to shift my parenting, and then I'm going to actually shift my child's behavior. And so it's actually that awareness, I think, is super powerful, because it's not that I'm a magical unicorn or my clients are. It's that you learn those skills to piece that puzzle together, and everybody can have that.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that's, I think, so important, which is awareness. Right. Mm-hmm. And for me, the number one thing that I've learned from being a parent is that parenting teaches you so much more about yourself than you realize. And when I look at my kids, oftentimes I feel like I'm looking in a mirror, and I've caught myself on multiple occasions, especially as an early parent, reacting to situations not based on them, but more based on me and like my insecurities that I'm seeing. Is that something that you see a lot of too, where parents are snapping at their kids because they see them doing something, and it's not even necessarily about, oh, why is my kid doing that? But it's more about like, what are people going to think about my kid doing that? And that's something that I see a lot of today. Parents just trying to live almost vicariously through their kids, and that creates a really toxic relationship in there.
Yeah, we're triggered by our kids' behaviors more often because it's something from our childhood that we were not happy with, or that we were afraid of, or that is stuck with us in kind of a traumatic way. And it's something that we don't want to repeat, but we almost, for lack of a better word, really hate ourselves for doing that again and doing it. And so then we when somebody judges us in public, or we think that somebody's judging us, it just really squashes our confidence, because we already know we don't want to be doing that. We already know we could be doing something different, and we're not. And so every time that we have a trigger to react with our kids' behavior, we need to stop and step back and say, hey, do I really understand why the behavior is happening? This is not about me. This is about my child's behavior. And without skills, that's where we just throw spaghetti at the wall, and it's out of control. Like people who are trying to lose weight or run marathons or anything in life, if you don't have a plan and you don't have the tools and you don't have the skills, you're really just guessing, and that feels scary and overwhelming. And so that's why it's really important, if we are losing our patience or we are triggered by something, to really get to that root cause so that we can break that cycle. Otherwise, we're just continuing that same kind of generational trauma for generations to come.
Yeah, when you're just guessing like that too, you're not seeing progress, and then you just get more and more frustrated. You feel like you're just stuck in this cycle, right?
Exactly. Okay, let's do the last few on our secret 6, and then we can go into consequences and anything else juicy. So the other thing that we want to look at is our child's emotional needs. Do we know how to meet our child's needs of power and attention every single day? So what's going to happen is, as you're going to start to see, is with that communication and information your child is giving you through their behavior, they're trying to meet their needs. They're trying to find boundaries. They're trying to tell you they're overtired, they're over hungry, they're struggling with transitions. They don't have enough power or attention. So you're going to start to see is all of these things that we could easily check off would help your child have their needs met, so they don't have to fight to have them met. So if we're looking at our power and attention of our kids, what we want to envision is them having like two big red invisible buckets, and they're floating above their heads every single day. One is power, one is attention. If the buckets are empty, you're going to see unwanted behaviors. It's just hands down, that's what's going to happen. So think of power as your child's need to feel confident, accomplished, their self-worth. Where do they fit in at home if you have siblings? Where do they fit in their world at school? Really how they feel about themselves. And that's really where we want to build our child's capabilities. The other bucket, attention, seems super straightforward, but there's two areas where we miss the boat as parents. One, kids don't care if they get positive or negative attention. So if we're yelling at our kids, we're reminding, we're in their face, we're taking things away, we're putting them in timeout, we're picking them up and manhandling them into the car or forcing them to brush their teeth. They're like, ooh, ding, 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 this is great. I'm getting power, I'm getting attention. They're right in front of my face. They're not watching TV. They're not on their phone. They're not talking to mom. They're not talking to dad. So we're teaching our kids to act out more to get their buckets filled, which again is backfiring and making us exhausted as parents. And so with that attention, keeping in mind that they'll take negative or positive attention, and then also keep in mind perspective. We spend all day for our kids. We work to support our kids. We play with them. We come home after a long day at work and we get on the floor and we bathe them and we clean up their mess and we grocery shop and plan birthday parties. I mean, all we do from our perspective is spend time with our kids. But from our child's perspective, they just say, no, mom and dad, that's actually your job description. That's what you signed up for when you said you were going to have kids. Where's my attention? Where's my attention so that I can fill up my needs in a way that represents me, that I understand? And so for all of my clients that I work with, and for parents who are not clients of mine, I do have a free guide, which you can put in your show notes if you'd like, which is my golden time formula. It takes 10 minutes a day. It will use 5 key ingredients. It is simple to use. If you use it consistently with your kids and you follow the 5 ingredients, you are going to start filling up those power and attention buckets in a really positive way. Because I'll tell you, your kids need your connection and bond. But as parents, we really desperately need it as well. And that's a lot of our guilt, is that we don't feel that connection and bond, or we're guilty that we're at work and we're not home enough. And so this is a way to sort of help with some of that mom or dad guilt as well. And so working and filling up those buckets. So definitely download the Golden Time Guide and start doing it. I want to hear from everybody on how it's going. But it's a really, really, really important tool.
Yeah.
Download that at tiaslightham.com.
Yeah, and we'll include the link in our show notes too, and make it really easy for people to find it, because it is really important. Sometimes people do just need a guide or some kind of accountability of, like you said, like to just check in on some of these things, right?
Yeah.
One example that you can tell me if this is a good example or not, but I was noticing that exactly what you said with my kids at one point, where it was like, I recognized why they were acting out, why they were not listening and stuff, is because they wanted us to get to that point, because that was attention for them. And, my wife works full time. I run 2 businesses. Like, we have a busy lifestyle. And I recognized that, and I thought, yeah, my kids, like, they just want that attention. They don't care what kind of attention they get. They just want the attention. And one thing that I did was, essentially kind of like how you mentioned with the buckets, was I started to actually give more one-on-one time, where we started to dedicate, okay, this week we're going to give one-on-one time to this child. This week we're going to give one-on-one time to this child. And we really did notice a difference in their behavior over that time, because they just wanted that special attention. They just wanted some different attention, and they were craving that positive attention. They didn't want the negative attention, but they reacted in that way, right?
Yeah. And now with Golden Time, you're going to do one-on-one time every day. And it's not going to be some major thing. It's going to be small and easy, and you're going to just see how it fits in your schedule. But by doing that every day, you're going to fill those buckets up so that we can encourage cooperation instead of force. So a lot of times those buckets are empty all day long. We expect our kids to do the things we need them to do, but without our needs met and without our kids feeling really great, they're not going to do great. And so we have to remember, and a phrase that I always say is, kids will do better when they feel better. And that's what we want to try and do. Whereas if we're yelling at our kids and we're on our kids and we're nagging and we're reminding, our kids aren't feeling that good. They're trying to meet their needs, but they're not feeling great. And then we expect them to do great. So we're going to kind of flip-flop everything and get everybody on kind of a healthier, more positive path.
Yeah. You also mentioned power as one of those buckets. And I think parents do really struggle with this, like the power struggle. And would one good example of that be just giving your kids more choice in what they're doing, where it's instead of saying, you have to go to bed right now, giving them a choice of saying, okay, you can either go to bed now or you can read a story and then go to bed. Like something like that, where you're giving them more choice. It's like the outcome is the same. It's essentially, you're kind of tricking them a little bit, but you're tricking them into having a choice, having some control over that situation. Is that a good example of that?
Yeah, I always say like all these tools, they work on my partner too. Not to throw you guys under the bus, but they work on all adults. They work on everybody. The idea is to have our kids think that they're in control, but they're really not in control. But we are giving them some areas to be in control. I always say like if my husband came home and he was like, pick up your shoes, do this. Why are you doing that? Why isn't dinner ready? Well, I mean, oh my God, I'd be like, what? Screw you. No way. But then we do that to our kids sometimes. We're like, get dressed, go to bed, get ready for this, go do. And we're kind of drill sergeants without meaning to, because we just expect our kids to do the things that we need them to do. And so what we want to do is sort of back up the bus, and we want to give them power proactively so that when we do need to tell them to do something, they don't feel like they've been bossed around all day long. They feel like, oh, I have a lot of power. Oh, mom or dad are asking me to do something. Fine, I'll do it. And so we really call that proactive choice. And so with proactive choice, you want to give 2 choices, and you should do this as much as you can throughout the day. You might even overdo it in the beginning while you're resolving behaviors, and then you can kind of slow it down a little bit. But proactive choice will be 2 choices that work for you. So if it's, would you like the blue cup or the pink cup? Would you like to do your homework in the kitchen or in your room? Would you like to go to bed in 5 minutes or 6 minutes? We need to leave the park. Would you like to slide 7 times or 8 times? You choose. And so really that 7 times or 8 times, the 5 minutes or the 6 minutes, the homework down or homework up, none of that bothers you. So you're going to get choices that you really don't care. Either one is great. Sometimes parents will say, well, if I give the choice to, go to bed or watch TV, well, they're going to choose TV. Well, exactly. So you need to give choices that make sense, that work for you, so that you don't create that struggle. What's going to happen is each time you give a proactive choice, a lot is happening. It's not just a pink cup or a blue cup. Like if we think about even toddlers having to choose between a pink cup or a blue cup, they have to get their decision-making skills and their process is going. They have to start saying, okay, do I want the pink cup or do I want the blue cup? And then a lot of times they'll choose the blue cup, and then they'll cry and tantrum and be upset because they actually really want the pink cup. Well, this is great because we're teaching them that you're going to get choices in life. You're going to get opportunities to make decisions that are either going to work for you or not work for you, so that as our kids grow, their decision-making skills are really honed in. And so when somebody says to them, you know what, are you going to drink that beer and drive, or are you going to call an Uber, that our kids know that making good decisions works well for them. A lot of times we'll give our kids the choice of the pink cup or the blue cup, then they say orange cup, and then they're like, no, I want the orange cup, I want the orange cup. And then we give them the orange cup. Well, now we're teaching them that whatever you want in life, you can get. If you tantrum and cry, you're going to get what you want. Instead, I want parents to say calmly, without emotion, gosh, I'm really sorry that you want the orange cup. It's not clean right now. So you can have the orange cup after lunch. The choice is blue or pink. You choose or I'll choose. And so what happens is we get really into this rhythm of doing this. Your kids are going to really get good at choosing things that work for them. They're going to start to feel empowered. Their bucket's going to fill, and you're going to get less pushback on those moments where you say, hey guys, we're leaving for soccer in 5 minutes. Can you hurry up and get your shoes on? All of a sudden, they're not going to push back as much. Does that make sense?
Totally. I think a good example of that is even like trying to choose a restaurant to go to. Right. I know I've had that. Have you had that argument at times, or not an argument, but just like that, where you get so stuck in, where do you want to go to eat? I don't know. You choose.
Absolutely. And don't get me started on picking something on Netflix either.
Right. Like something as small as that, even from like stepping outside of the parenting scope, like something as small as that, giving a choice rather, I've noticed has made a big difference too, where it's like, well, do you want to watch this movie or that movie? And then now all of a sudden it's not even less of an argument, but now it's actually more effective as a solution to, it's just way more convenient. It's way more effective.
Yeah. I remember coming across a study a few years ago about choice, and it's not so much that we love infinite choice. We have this proclivity towards learning to appreciate what we have between, choice A or choice B instead of choice A to Z, which is kind of interesting too. So yeah, infinite choice isn't necessarily a good thing. We think it is. And a lot of marketers will try to get our attention that way. But as human beings, yeah, it's just about learning to love what you have. That's much more special.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming for kids to have lots of choice. It's hard for them to even start to decide what they would want. And so two choices makes it really, really easy for them, and also makes it easy for you. So we don't want to overcomplicate things. We're already tired. We don't have a lot of time. And so we're trying to simplify things as much as we can.
Yeah. And I can certainly see now how it is a process of learning. And something that I really appreciated through your messaging is how you have to take action and you have to take ownership, because if you just leave something be, it gets worse. And there's this metaphor that I really like about problems in your life, where it starts maybe as a baby dragon and it's cute and it just it doesn't really breathe fire yet. It just kind of breathes little puffs of smoke, but you leave it and eventually it grows into something that not only destroys you, but everything around you. And so that can be a metaphor for, maybe certain problems in your life that you're ignoring. But in this conversation, it's literally the baby dragon is your baby.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And problems grow as our kids grow. And so if we're band-aiding problems, our toddler tantruming, we pick them up, we put them in timeout, we hold the door shut, we overpower them because we're bigger. What happens when your kids are my kid's age? My 13-year-old wears a size men's 12 shoe. He's bigger than me. He's taller than me. I cannot put him on a stair and force him to stay or hold his door shut. Like, he could probably do that to me. And so what are we going to do when our kids grow if our parenting tactics are these Band-Aid solutions? And so our goal is to deal with it while they're the baby dragon and deal with it while they're the baby, so that we have the skills so that as they grow, you don't have challenges and problems all the time. I say to parents all the time, if daily it feels like a grind and a battle and it's exhausting, and don't get me wrong, especially with your younger kids, they need you all the time. They really do. You have to bathe them and dress them, and it's constant for a while. But if you don't have the tantrums and the screaming and the crying and the pushback, it's really enjoyable to do those things, but we miss out on it because we're battling with our kids. But if we don't deal with it now, it's just going to be so exhausting and quite scary, really, to have teenagers in this world who fear coming home because they don't want to get in trouble, or they're worried that they're going to get yelled at or grounded or lose their device. And that's not going to be a long-term relationship that you really want to develop with your kids, because it's going to backfire.
Yeah, it really will. And I'm sure, have you come across the concept of the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs?
I have.
Yeah. So some of the things that you were just mentioning there, so on the questionnaire, and I use this in clinic, there'll be things like, were you threatened by a parent? Were you hit? And things like that. And, I just think that if you're not an effective communicator, negotiator and things, it turns into threats. And then what happens is just a positive answer to 3 or 4 of those 10 questions. I just mentioned 2 of them right there. The risk for like substance use disorder and early pregnancy, like all sorts of things. I don't want to talk. There's some really serious stuff that comes from it too that I don't even really want to mention on this podcast. But and so I just think what you're doing is so important, because if you can reduce that early on, you're not. It's actually beyond just kind of that bidirectional dynamic of parenting. It's like you are decreasing their risk for smoking and alcoholism and suicidal ideation. I guess that's some of the more serious stuff, right? Yeah. So. Yeah.
And with the teen and tween suicide rates have gone up so drastically. I mean, I know mothers in general, like 44% increase in mental health since the pandemic. I mean, there's a lot going on in our world right now, and if we don't change our parenting, we're not setting anybody up for success. And you're exactly right. Like, what we're role modeling today is the way our kids are going to treat their kids and their spouses and it really is cyclical. And we have to kind of stand up and say, I'm going to break that cycle.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that as well, because there must be a tremendous amount of resistance when literally you might be up against hundreds or thousands of generations where they've been doing this the same way. So do you run into significant resistance like that, where it's like, well, this is just how my parents parented me, and maybe this is putting you on the spot, but is there a way to help them break through that type of resistance that they may have?
Yeah. So I always say is just to ask yourself, do I feel really good about how things are going? Like, do I feel good at the end of my day? Do I go to bed feeling like, wow, this is really going well? I feel in control. I like the way my relationship is with my kids. It doesn't feel stressful. If you're feeling good about things, then you're probably on the right path. But if you're going to bed at night, like most of the clients that come to me crying, feeling guilty, hoping and praying and crossing their fingers that the next day is going to be better, just out of whole sheer luck, then we really need to make some changes. And a lot of times parents will say, well, I'm on board to make change. I don't feel good, but my partner doesn't agree. He thinks that it's fine, or she thinks that this is just what life with kids is like, and we don't need to spend money or time or energy to make changes. And so with that, I always say, you have to do you. So there's a lot of times parents join my program and only one parent is on board. 9 times out of 10, the other parent will see how effective it works and how much easier it is. And just like we can't force our kids to make change, we can't force our partners to come on board. So we role model, we do ourselves, we do us, we show them. And then if they want to come on board, great. Kids will flock to the positive parenting strategies. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to have results because both parents don't do it. It just really isn't. The idea is, can I go to bed and can I look back and say, did I do everything I could possibly do to be the parent that I wanted to be? And if the answer is no, then that's where you say, okay, I'm going to make a change.
Yeah. And you say the kids will flock towards the positive parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go towards the parent who's like the good guy all the time either, right? It's about the one who's approaching situations in the most healthy way, not just necessarily the one that's giving them what they want. Because we've all seen that before, especially when it comes to like divorce and these types of things where there's this almost tug of war. I've seen it with friends. I've been very fortunate. My parents weren't divorced and stuff. But I've seen it with friends where it's, you feel that tug of war. It's like, well, my dad always buys me this and that and kind of thing. And it doesn't end well. Right.
No. Yeah. Because if we're thinking about that, the idea of being a positive, disciplined parent, that's like our ultimate goal. That's where we want to be we want to be up there. But usually as parents, we're either authoritarian or we're permissive. So the authoritarian parent is really you do it because I said so. You live in this house. I pay for it. You should be grateful. You go do it or else I'm, grounding you or whatever. So we basically just overpower our kids. And in my generation, that's how a lot of parents parented. They didn't have all these tests and studies and stats and things to change their parenting. And so a lot of us will be authoritarian. Then we have on the other side of the pendulum, we have the permissive parent. And so this is where sometimes parents think, well, I'm going to be nice to my child and my child's going to want to do the things that I need them to do. And this permissive parent is really the no. Okay, fine. No, you can't have the cookie. No, I said no. I said no. Okay, fine. Whatever. I can't deal with it. Okay, fine. Just have it. And we want to set boundaries. We're trying to be kind. We're trying to be nice, but then we give in. Mm-hmm. So if we look back to the idea that our kids will push boundaries until boundaries are found, that permissive parent really is telling your child to push harder and longer and stronger, and you'll finally get what you want. And with the authoritarian parent, the boundary is, I'm overpowering you. So, oh, shoot, my power bucket's weakening. So now I need to overpower you back. So we're now taking away from all of those areas that we really need to work on based on our parenting approach.
Yeah. I'm also really glad that you mentioned like you do you in that dynamic too, because that's something I talk a lot with people about support systems, especially when trying to get healthy or making any positive change, really, which is really what we're talking about here. It's when you start to make those positive changes, the people around you will almost always eventually drift that way with you. It's just tough. It's resistance. People don't like to change. And I often tell people as well, Like when you're trying to make a healthy change, it's not that they don't want you to make that healthy change. It's that, it might be just difficult for them. They're not ready to make that change yet. They're not ready to jump into that process yet, because for whatever reason, they're just not ready. And it's tough for them to see you growing beyond them. I think that is probably very relevant in parenting too, where you have this, it's already difficult when you have two different people from two completely different lifestyles, possibly, and they're coming together to try and connect on how do we mold this human. And so when one person's trying to change that, oftentimes you are going to get resistance from somebody else. But so I just wanted to say, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's so important for people to hear, is just do you and be open about it and communicate with it. And, eventually they'll probably join you. And if they don't, then, maybe there's a disconnect there.
Yeah. And it's so important to know that most of the time that people don't move forward, most of the time parents stay stuck. It's a lot of times they'll say, well, I don't have the money to invest. And yes, that can be the case some of the time, but most of the time we don't move forward with, learning to run a marathon or an Ironman, or change our diet, or change our parenting, or anything, is because we have internal language and internal voices that kind of self-sabotage, that say, oh, well, you're never going to be able to do that, or your kids are always going to act this way, or what would my parents say if I started to parent differently, or my parents tell me I should spank my kids, but I don't want to spank my kids, but if I do the program, then I'm basically telling my parents that they're wrong. And so we have all this internal dialogue that self-sabotages us. And so it takes a lot of strength to say, you know what, I love my parents, or I don't love my parents, but I'm not happy with how I was raised, and I'm going to make changes, and I'm going to just know that it's really small changes to get really big results. And sometimes we think, like, how are we ever going to get here? How are we ever going to change all these things? It's really quite amazing how we just implement these little tiny stepping stones. And before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, whoa, how did this happen? And that's really where you create lasting results.
You talked about the spectrums. On one end, there was the authoritarianism, and on the other end is permissibility. Is the right mix somewhere in between, or is there almost like a third category?
Yeah, so the third category is actually called authoritative, but it's so close to authoritarian that everybody's always like, which one is it? So I just call it positive discipline. And so that's really kind of where we're in the middle, more or less. We're trying to be kind and respectful, like the permissive parent is ultimately trying to do. But with the authoritarian parent, we're setting boundaries, but we're setting them in a way that involves mutual respect. Okay. And so what we want to do is we want to parent the same way we want to be treated. And so if we don't want somebody saying to us, like, pick up your shoes or you're not going out, then we don't want to say those same things to our kids. And so I say to parents, if the way that you're parenting and the things you're saying and the things you're doing to your kids inside your house could be broadcasted on national television, and you'd be feeling proud, regardless if your child's having a tantrum or not, because kids are going to have emotions. That's not the issue. But if you're parenting in a way that you feel really great about, that anybody could watch it, it could be on Netflix, then you're probably doing great things. If you're like, gosh, I hope the nanny cam's not on right now. I have a lot of clients that say, I was really embarrassed of my nanny cam before I started working with you. And so then that means, like, we probably need to make some changes, because if we're looking behind our shoulder, like, ooh, who heard us say that? I shouldn't talk like that to my kids. Chances are we're not using mutual respect. And so that's really where we want to get to this place where we parent with mutual respect, but we still have really concrete boundaries and expectations. And we do follow through, but we follow through in a way that uses discipline, not punishment.
One thing that I'll often ask myself when I'm feeling like I'm not the greatest parent, because we all have those times, I'll often circle back and ask myself, how, if somebody was to ask my kids how I'm doing as a parent, what would they say? And when I ask myself that, oftentimes it brings me back to earth a little bit, where it's, just asking that question. Almost always when I circle back to that, I go, okay, they're going to say, like, what do they see of me? If somebody on the outside was to ask, well, they'd probably see dad's super hardworking, and like these positive things start to come back into my mind, and it kind of recenters me with that spectrum that you guys are talking about. I always find it does kind of recenter me a little bit, because I think we can do the opposite as well, where we can say, man, you focus on all the negative things that you're doing and none of the positive things. And that can also create a bad cycle where because then you are going to bed frustrated at yourself. And if you're not reminding yourself of, yeah, but I also did something really great today with my kids, or yeah, but they also probably really appreciated this thing that I did. That can bring you back to earth a little bit and start to lessen that cycle a little bit too, for me anyways.
No, I think that's an amazing thing to do. And I'm gonna share that with my communities, to ask yourselves. And I used to do that when the kids were younger. I would say, okay, on Instagram, it's actually on my account, but I would say, what would you do if your kids were fighting all the time? And they were just like these little people, like 3 and 5 years old. And they'd say, well, if my kids were fighting, then first, and they'd have this whole plan. And it's not because I sat them down and drilled them, but it's because when they would fight, that's how we would deal with it. That's how we would manage it. And so they have these skills. And so you're role modeling to your kids like conflict resolution and how to walk away and manage your emotions and how to treat others and how to communicate with others and how to self-advocate. Like there's so much good that comes from learning the skills to parent in a positive, disciplined way that you'll take with you to your workplace and to your own relationships. It is how you break those cycles. It's such an amazing thing to watch parents do.
Is it fair to say like kids or your relationship with your kids is not that different from your other relationships in your life? Like we talked about boundaries a little bit and how important it is. I think when we set boundaries and we don't respect or we don't live up to those boundaries, that's where negative emotions and stuff start to come in. Would it be fair to say that is like when you're working with your kids, it's really no different from any other relationship. There can't be one, like my wife and I, there can't be one person who's the authority figure. That relationship will never work. There has to be this balance. There has to be communication. You have to be willing to listen, and the other side has to be willing to listen too. I find with my kids, like I try really, really hard to focus on communication with them and listen to what they're feeling, listen to what they want. And an example, I think we talked about this when we first talked, Tia. I'm a martial arts instructor and my kids are in my martial arts class. And so oftentimes I'll check in with them if I notice they had a bad class or something, or they just weren't into it. And I'll check in. Hey, are you actually still liking this? Like, is this something you still want to do? Because it's so easy to just be like, why were you acting like that today? Like you embarrassed me. I'm the instructor, like those kinds of things. But it's checking in and understanding, because then when they feel like they're being heard, they're also going to be more willing to come to me when they have a problem and they need a listening ear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want our kids to feel seen, heard, and understood, but we also still need to be their guide and their leader and their support. So my son, Beckett, who's 10 and a half, is a phenomenal tennis player since he's been like 3. He's played tennis like crazy. He plays on a national team with like 16-year-olds. He's unbelievable. But with COVID, he has gotten into basketball because he couldn't play tennis and the courts were closed. And so sadly, his dream of being a tennis star has shifted. And it's hard for me as a parent to watch him kind of give up on that because he's so great at it. And it can't be my dream. It has to be his dream. And so the courts are open. And so he had to go this morning at 6 a.m. before school. And he's only 10 years old and he's got to get up at 5 a.m. And I know it's a lot. And I said to him last night, do you really want to give up on your dream of tennis? Because it's a really big decision to make. Or are you not happy at your tennis club and you'd like to look at another club or just working with your private coach? Well, if I could just work with my private coach, I wouldn't give it up. And so I said, okay, great. That's great. So let's talk about that tomorrow. Finish your time at your club because we've already invested. And then we'll talk about it. And so what happened was a lot of times that kind of conversation is, well, no, we paid for it. You're going. I don't care. No, you need to not give up. Like, and we kind of, and it's not because we want to be mean. It's because deep down we know like it would be so good for them to continue those things. And so sometimes we want to step back and we just want to have age appropriate conversations. And so for really little kids, a really helpful tool is children's book. And there's a link on my website to a children's book corner, which I have designed and my team and I to set up for easy access for parents. But if you're struggling with kids, feeling shy, or you've lost a pet or a loved one, or separation or divorce, or picky eating, or potty training, or sleep, or sibling rivalry, or any topic you can basically imagine, you can go in there and choose your topic. And you can browse all these books that I've recommended and click, and they ship from Amazon. And this allows you to have age-appropriate conversations with your kids to help them feel less alone, for you to be able to kind of gain the confidence and how to start that conversation in an age-appropriate way. Sometimes we disregard how effective children's books can be, and we disregard how much we want to have those conversations with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's something that I'm fascinated by, is that balance between being the person who is like, no, you got to stick with it, right? Again, growing up in martial arts, and you grew up in martial arts as well, and that's a big thing where it's like, no, you stick with it, like learning to stay committed to things versus learning to let go as a parent and say, no, let's let them do them. Like, let them do their own thing, let them figure it out. There's an interesting balance, and that's something we could probably dive into another time, because that's I think a deep talk discussion, right? Yeah. Is there anything so far that we haven't covered that you would like to cover?
I think it's important for parents to know the difference between punishment and discipline, because sometimes we think that we're doing one thing, but we're doing the other. And we think that we're trying to do the right thing, but we're still doing the thing that's ineffective. And so really understanding that punishment and discipline are not the same, that they're really polar opposites. And so if we consider it like kind of two umbrellas, if we're under the punishment umbrella, our parenting tactics are causing our child blame, shame, and pain. And if we're in the discipline umbrella, we're just teaching and training. And so even when we say the words blame, shame, and pain, it doesn't feel good. It's kind of like, ugh. And when you say the words teach and train, you're like, oh, I feel good about that. I could teach and train my kids. I like that role. And so we really want to work on being able to teach and train. And so discipline gets a bad rap. We got to discipline your kids. Well, no, that's just me teaching and training. And so sometimes if we look at the classic case of spilled milk, because we've all had an accident at the table and it's frustrating, and we don't want smelly, stinky, sour milk places. And so what happens typically if that milk spills at the table, a parent who's using punishment tactics will most likely react in a way that's, why do you always have to do that? I don't every single time. There's always a mess. Can't you just sit at the table and eat? Like, what's the big deal? It's not that hard. And so we get it. It's not that hard. You should just sit. We want them to eat. Like, those are all things that we can get to, but we create blame, shame, and pain. So your child goes away feeling not that, oh, next time I should pick up my milk and I should pay more attention. But it's really that I'm a bad person. They don't love me. They don't want to be around me. I can never do anything right. It's not solving the problem. The problem is the spilled milk. So when we use punishment, we actually lose sight of the problems. And that's why we cycle so much, because we just keep weakening our relationship and losing sight of the problem, and weakening our relationship and losing sight of the problem. If we spill the milk, the child spills the milk, and we use discipline, you would respond instead of react. And you would say something like, oh gosh, accidents happen for everybody. No worries. We need to clean that up, right? So would you like to do it on your own, or would you like my help? So the point is that we're teaching them, when we have a spill, we tidy up. We're there to support you, but you still need to participate.
Yeah.
And that they don't need to be fearful for those mistakes that happen. Now, if a child's fooling around at the table and they're being silly, well, now it's not an accidental spilled milk. Now we say, okay, do I have concrete, clear, and consistent boundaries around meal time? Am I following through? Do they know what my expectations are? That's where we need to back the bus up further. But learning really the difference between punishment and discipline, and starting to recognize where you fall, is going to help you bring more awareness, so you can determine if you're kind of ready to take that leap and make some changes.
Yeah, that kind of circles back to that BandAid Solutions too. And what came to my mind when you were saying that is, when you are covering up the problem like that, now all of a sudden it's out of sight, out of mind, and now we're not exploring the why. We're not getting deeper into the thing, because now we've just covered it up, and it's okay, I'm not dealing with this right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Think about having a headache. If you have a headache and you pop a Tylenol or an Advil, your headache symptom is that it doesn't feel good. And so you take the Advil or Tylenol to BandAid it. That's the same thing we're doing with our kids' behavior. But why did the headache happen? Were you dehydrated? Did you work out too hard? You didn't refuel or replenish? Like, are you eating something that's causing headaches? Are you having an allergy? Like, we're Band-Aid problem solving every time we pop Advil and Tylenol just because we have a headache. And we're Band-Aid problem solving because typically we're solving symptoms, and we really need to root problem solve as parents. And that's a learned skill. And so that's where I get to help parents inside my coaching program from around the world, and watching them transform is like the best job ever. And changing lives, helping happier kids, happier families, happier parents, and ultimately changing generations.
Yeah.
I had a few light bulb moments during this, particularly when you talked about asking the child, whether they're 3 or 4 years old, how would you solve this? And that was so illuminating for me. And I think that, especially because you talked about, was it attention and power? Was that the two big buckets? That's filling both, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you ask them something like that. So
for sure it is. For sure it is, because you want to hear them.
Yeah, I really liked that. And I really liked the concept of, imagine you're broadcasting it on national TV.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful too. In the world of habit building, I tell my patients, if you had 10 imaginary people following you around all day, first they go, oh, that's creepy. No, it's just an exercise. But would they come back and tell me that, yes, that person meditated for the 10 minutes or took cold showers or whatever it is? And it's just kind of a good mind
accountability
trick.
That's
exactly.
Accountability, and everybody needs it, right? Everybody needs accountability for sure.
Yeah, and that's where I tell people too. Like, oftentimes I'll hear people, I need accountability, I just can't afford it. Well, you don't need to buy it. You can create it in your own mind, just like that too, right? It's maybe some people need more concrete accountability. However, you can create it. Tia, I know you're very busy, and I wish we could keep you for hours and hours here, because this is a topic I could discuss for so long, and you're so brilliant. But I know you have to go soon. Where can people find you one more time?
Yeah, people can find me on my website, tiaslightham.com. If you're really a social media fan, then I am on Instagram at Tia Parenting Coach. I never thought this would happen, but I am on TikTok at Parenting Coach, and I have 750,000 followers. I don't even know how that happened from parenting videos.
Because the need is out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So TikTok is just Parenting Coach, but I have lots of things going on. I run workshops throughout the year virtually. I have my coaching program, which has 4 different levels for those who want to invest more and get more support, or invest less and kind of DIY. There's really something for everybody, starting as small as $47. Also, my free weekly coaching on my platforms. So there is something for everybody. So my suggestion and advice to everybody is, do a little deep dive. Ask yourself, did I know how to do these things Tia was talking about today? Do I feel confident in these areas? Is there some places I could do some work? And then decide, how deep do you want to take it? And which step are you going to take? Choose any step you want. Maybe it's the free guide. Maybe it's a virtual workshop. Maybe it's my whole program. But don't do nothing, because that's going to give you the same results that you're currently having. And if you're not happy with them, then we got to get it unstuck somehow.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll link those in the show notes in the description of this episode, so that we make it really easy for people to find you.
Perfect. Awesome. That's great. Well, it was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, no, thank you. We'll definitely have to have you back for sure.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care. See ya.